again, English is the most dominant language. I mean, seemingly, no, I think the most people speak Mandarin, right? Yeah. That's just because China has so many people. So, I mean, we can give coronavirus a few months to see if Mandarin is still the most spoken language. But probably a terrible thing to say. But you get the idea. I know, yeah, I know. I'm a bad person. I get it. We did lose one in California, what, day before yesterday? So, it may be a race. But it's worth considering, like, what you're saying is right. So we look at war as kind of like an expansion of territory, maybe an accumulation of resources, whatever it is. And then it's difficult, though, to go into a country, let's say conquer a country, and then say, all right, keep everything the same as you have it right now. And then we'll just kind of, because, people have that strong sense of national identity and all of that. I haven't studied this subject extensively, but from what I have looked at, it seems like Alexander the Great was pretty good at that stuff. Go in, conquer, and say, you're going to keep everything as it is. It's just that your taxes and everything will go to us now instead of, directly to you. In fact, even when he conquered Persia, he married a Persian. He met with the queen, did all that stuff. But that's the exception, though. It might be why he's remembered as the Great. But yeah, language is a trippy thing. It's worth considering. I wonder how many of you, like, if we could give up all of our languages and just agree on like one language for the whole world. I wonder, would you be in favor of that? No? Why not? Sounds boring.
What's our identity if we have alien?
If we have just one, obvious, American English.
American English?
Right? As long as we do that, we're in favor of it. No, I mean, that's one of the things that catches me up. That's why I asked you guys. Cause I thought about this extensively. I don't know. I think about it because there are synthetic languages that people have made, just made up brand new languages out of nothing, and with varying degrees of success. But I just think about, I wonder how many of our problems we could solve if we just had a same language. If there wasn't like these translational problems. Like, in a funny way, you see it happening in advertisements sometimes. So, for example, the Chevy Nova. You guys, it's an old car. They don't even make them anymore. But the Chevy Nova sold a lot of units, man, here in the United States. And then they shipped them down and started selling them in Mexico. And nobody in Mexico bought one. As the ad goes in. Can you guess why?
Because they didn't understand.
Well, they didn't understand. Well, yeah, I guess the advertisers certainly didn't understand. Think about the word Nova. Break it up. What does it mean? No. Va. Which means the car what? Doesn't go. Yeah, Nova means no, va means go. So there's an old tale, I don't even know if it's exactly true, but I've read it multiple times that they ship the car down there, as he's selling the car that doesn't go. People don't line up for that, And so you might think like, well, if there was one language, we wouldn't mess that up. And then even we get caught up on the idea that things mean different things to different people, And then you can start to see all the confusion that piles up. And so, I don't know, it's a question like whether or not we want to do something like that, because it would solve a lot of our problems, but we absolutely lose a big piece of our past with that. We lose our history, we lose our culture. There's something that seems to be connected there. Like I was saying, as long as we should do that, have just one language, as long as it's English, right? Because I don't want to lose Shakespeare. But everybody's got those things that they wouldn't want to lose. And so, it's one of those things we just gotta, I don't know if we can figure that out. Well, what she's saying here to rob a people of their language is not just to kind of have a culture that's dominating, let's say, like I was talking about earlier. And you go all around the world, you see people wearing American band T-shirts from all over the world. I was in Jordan one time. I saw a kid wearing a T-shirt for the band Slipknot. And I thought, that's interesting. All the way over here, I've seen that. I've seen kids in Paris wearing shirts for System of a Down. And I was like, wow, all the way over here. From Los Angeles all the way to Paris, this is happening. Because culture has a way of doing that. Movies and music have a way of doing that. But, whether it's for better or worse, it's a heck of a question. So we're not talking about something like that where people just kind of choose it. But she's referring specifically to robbing people of a language. You know? And if the purpose of war is to eradicate, wipe somebody out, you know, if war used to be fought for the most part, to wipe people out, well, this is a good way of doing it, to completely remove people's language, to rob them of it. Not to allow it to go away, but to rob them of it, if that makes sense. Now, she's suggesting here, of course, that we can do this kind of a thing with, without violent means. You know, essentially just like social stigma or public policies or whatever, but you know, she's certainly equating it there to violence. You know? Other thoughts? Yeah.
Languages, some languages about instinct too, right? Like a lot of Native American languages are supposed to be instinct.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a lot of languages that are there. There's one Native American language. You can look this up. I don't know which one it was, of course. But the last person to speak it died in the early 20th century. And so this guy, they got him into a recording studio and he recorded the language. So we have a recording of it. You know, but there are so many languages that are just, that have gone away. I mean, and we're talking about since the beginning of time. You know, you ever think about like Neanderthals and then, you know, modern humans, and that we were all living around the same time along with Denisovans, another group of kind of like, you know, we all had different languages. Would you ever wonder like what a Neanderthal language sounded like? They had to have had a way of communicating. They must have had sounds that made words, and we'll never know how it is that they did that. But it's important, by the way, because I don't know if this is true. Again, another thing I don't know if it's true or not, but I've read this, that the Eskimos have over 300 words for snow. You know, why do you have to have 300 words for snow? Well, in San Diego, we don't. We only need to have one word for snow. You know, snow. Now, why would you have to have more than one word for snow, though? Where, you know, if you live in a bunch of snow, you know, what kind of snow is it? Is it heavy snow? Is it light snow? It's just like here in San Diego, we have one word for rain. Anytime it drizzles a little bit, it's, you know, oh my God, the world's going to end, because we never see rain. But we, you know, even less frequently see snow. But if you're living there, you've got to know, is it heavy snow, light snow? Is it coming in from that direction, that direction? Is the kind of snow that's going to pack? Is there more on the way? Because your whole life is centered around the idea of snow. You know, and it sounds silly, but the point of it is that you can only think in the words that you have. You can only think with the language that you have. Think of a word that exists for a thing that doesn't exist. You follow? Think about, we have a word for something that doesn't exist. I'll save you the trouble. There's no such thing. We come up with words because things exist. Well, if you don't have a word to describe something, it might as well not even exist, especially if you're not experiencing it. Like imagine if we lived here in San Diego and we never knew about snow. We were just kind of centralized right here. We'd never have a word for it. And so that means we could never conceptualize it. And we can never talk about it. You can only talk about the things that you have access to through language, which is why, like on the first day, I don't think I do it in 10th grade, but certainly in 12th grade, I asked on the first day of class, what are we doing here? Why do we have to do this language thing? You know, and a lot of times we have this thing of, oh, because I want to, you know, we need to graduate. Yeah, well, why? Oh, to get a better future. And we have like these really vacuous, broad, abstract ways of thinking about it. But there's something that's even more immediate and more pressing, more important than that. Why should we learn the language thing? Because there's nothing that's more powerful in the world than an articulate personality. A person who can convey ideas powerfully to people and help people understand it, regardless of whatever level they're at, or educational level, or level of understanding. If you can control language, you can control people. And you can find examples of this throughout history. Thinking about, like, for example, I mentioned Alexander the Great. Yeah, he was great because of the things that he accomplished. But here's a question. How did he accomplish those things? You know, you can think about someone, I mean, shoot, think about someone like Martin Luther King Jr. This was a dude who, at 27 years old, earns a doctorate, which, by the way, is really young to get a doctorate. That's a pretty impressive thing. This is a guy who shows up in town where people don't really know him and says, yeah, we're going to protest tomorrow. We're going to protest. Well, we're going to stand here. Oh, if we stand here, the cops are going to beat us up. Yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to stand here and get beaten up. And I'm sure there's one person there who's like, no, what he's saying is we're going to stand here, the cops are going to show up, and then we're going to beat up the cops. No. We're going to stand here and get beaten up. You bring dogs, though, and hoses. Yeah, we're going to stand here for that. Why? Because if people see this happening to us, then they're going to feel bad, and then things will change. All right, you guys down? You guys want to do that with me? Oh, you're down? All right, I got a few people with me. All right. I bet if Martin Luther King Jr. said it, he would have said it in such a way that you all would have been like, let's go get beaten up and fire hosed. And how is it? He didn't go there to everybody's house, like drag him out to the street. He just delivered a speech, and then people were like, yeah, let's go do this. This is a guy who changed the world, not by picking up a sword, not by picking up a gun, but just by using language that motivated people to do something that then changed the world. You know, the people who make lasting change are the people who are able to use that. We even think about like American generals. American generals are pretty unknown today. We don't really know who most of them are. But the ones we do know of, we know them because they speak well. They're eloquent. They're able to move the world with language. You know, this is one of the reasons that if any of you guys babysit little kids, you know, like especially little kids, however old this is, let's say that, I don't know, 3 years old. They talk at 3, yes? Okay. So let's say you have a little kid 3 years old. You ever have a little 3-year-old lie to you? Yeah, maybe. You ever have a 2-year-old lie to you? If you have a 2-year-old who lies to you, you have a really smart 2-year-old. There's a correlation, scary enough, there's a correlation between when a child starts lying and how intelligent they are. The younger you are when you start lying is an indicator that the more intelligent that you are. Why? Because little kids who are lying at that age, they understand that they can manipulate the world through language, just by talking. They understand that there's a difference between what they know and what you know, and that they can manipulate what you do by telling you something different from what they know. That's a really advanced concept. We take it for granted when we get older, but that's a really advanced concept. So a little kid realizes, I can change the world just by saying something that's not true. Now you start to realize the power of language. Can you imagine if Martin Luther King Jr., with his ability to speak and motivate people, had actually been evil, what he could have done? Sorry, silly question. You don't have to imagine it. Just look at Hitler. This was a guy who, a little small dude, who just with power of language was able to motivate people in this way. So the power to speak is really that. It's a power to speak. It's a power to change the world. Now, how you use that is entirely up to you, for good or for evil. And it's one of the reasons it's important to study it. Not just so that we can do it, but also so that we know its impact, so we can see when it's happening to us. I'm being motivated by a speech here. I'm, whatever. Then you can learn, of course, how to do it. And then once you know how to do it, well, now it's your choice every single day, for good or for evil. That's why learning language is so important. That's why it's so powerful. You go in for a job interview, once you go into the interview, they've already told you you're qualified for the position. You would not be in the interview unless you were qualified. Now they want to know, are you the kind of person that we want working here? And so if you can control your speech to a point where you can motivate them to hire you, they hire on the spot. Or shortly thereafter, essentially you gave the best speech, the best motivational speech, persuasive speech, or whatever. It's not just so that we can understand what Shakespeare says, although that helps. It's more so that we can understand how to move the world, how to manipulate the world, and I don't mean manipulate in a negative way, how to change the world in positive ways, hopefully, because if you're sensible, you won't want to do it for any other reason except for positive ways. But there are unsensible people out there, and we have to be aware of them. There are snakes in the garden. So, when we rob people of the ability to do that, we're robbing them not just of their ability, not just a cultural thing, which is true, we're robbing that as well. But moreover, we're robbing a person of their ability to change the world. So, questions? Yes? Good question. How is it violent? A good way of thinking about it as violent, when you're doing violence to somebody, think of it this way, when you're doing violence to somebody, you're trying to end them in certain ways. So we're not just talking about like kicking your friend in the shin. Like last night I was at the gym, and my coach's daughter, who's 8, I think it is, decided to punch his 5-year-old daughter. We're not just talking about that, shut up. We're talking about like violence of war, which is traditionally has always been to wipe people out or to dominate and subjugate, moreover to subjugate people. And so robbing people, just when you wage war on people, you subjugate them in a violent means, you know? So she's saying essentially that it isn't just physical violence. There's mental violence, psychological violence. And if you rob people of their ability to change the world, what are you forcing them to do? Accept the world as it is. And accepting the world as it is, if you think that there's no better future, then you're robbing people of their hope, their ability to dream of a better tomorrow in any way. Or even not even a better tomorrow, but even a tomorrow in which they have control. Isn't that one of the things that bothers you the most? That in your lives right now, a lot of things you don't have control over? And if you think about when you lie to your parents, or not you guys, I know, but or your friends lied to their parents, or your friends lied to their teachers, a lot of times what is that? Well, it's an effort to take control of something in which you don't feel like you have any control. You rob people of their ability to do that. You rob them of their autonomy. You rob them of their hope for a future, you know, and being able to orient themselves towards their own meaning. Does this make sense? Others?